Welcome into another edition of the Fight HQ podcast. Of course, I am Jason Floyd, joined by the fighter Pete Rogers Jr. We're here to break down UFC 301, which of course goes down on Saturday night in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. We got a 14-fight card come up here. Of course, we have 6 fighters who are priced at least at $9,000 on DraftKings. As we do this show here on a Wednesday afternoon, the lines on FanDuel have not come out, so we'll kind of see where those go throughout the week. Pete, how's it going, man?
What's going on, man? Busy. You just want to say real quick, you absolutely crushed it last week by yourself. Appreciate you, Jason. Last week's card was all right. I actually think that this card is pretty solid. Like, I don't hate this card. Volatile matchups. I know some people really dislike it. Granted, the pay-per-view product, I don't know if it's necessarily the best, but at least it's some names that I recognize and names that I kind of want to see what happens.
It's a fight night card to me. I'm just look, when you look at what the UFC has been putting a part of their pay-per-view lineup over the last year, 2 years, to me, this is, as we head into it, to me, just not a ton to get excited about. We'll see kind of how the fights play out on Saturday night. One of the things I thought was kind of interesting is, and I had to fact check this when I saw this on X, the fact that this is the first time that Alexandre Pantoja headlines a UFC fight card, of course, coming up here on his 3rd title fight inside the UFC. Of course, we do have our DraftKings contest that is already live. You can check that out there in the show notes. Congratulations to CC Ronan, 89, taking down the contest last week, scoring almost 475 points. He had Alex Perez, he had Guskov, he had Denise, he had Silva, James, who only got 7 points, and of course Udos Medic went out there and got 103 points there. And it was last week was a week that I thought was going to be some volatility. We definitely saw that there in the co-main event, and Nestle did not see the main event going down the way it did, but it went down that way. And of course, we're here to Pete may have a little more excitement for this fight card than I do, but this is a great opportunity to go out there and make some money here. And Pete, as we talk about game theory in terms of developing our lines for this one, to me, I think the thought process starts off with we got 6 fighters who are at least 9,000 on DraftKings, and I know there's already some people on our Discord channel who are sitting there saying, you know what? Maybe the optimal lineup is avoiding these 9,000 fighters.
Yeah, I mean, I always love playing in the mid-range, with everything, because you can build a pretty balanced lineup. Like one of my best, lineups that I ever made for, NBA DFS and MLB DFS is I was kind of just in the mid-range everywhere, and it allowed me to have a very balanced build. That necessarily doesn't matter in MMA, but sometimes you get some real good value. And this week, where there's so many high-end 9,000 options, it's going to be tough to avoid them all. I mean, they just look so enticing. But of course, each and every week, it's just a way to get different. Avoiding some of the very popular fights is a way to get different. Avoiding the main or co-main event. But yeah, I mean, when you have 6+ options that all look pretty damn good, I'm probably not going to suggest, avoiding the 9,000 options. But it's left for other weeks where it's like, they're okay. The likelihood of them winning decisions is pretty high. I'll avoid it. But this week, I actually think we got some pretty high-end options with some finishing potential.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at the main event, I think people are going to get to both sides of that equation, especially if you think that thing's going to go 5 rounds and getting a Steve Erceg at 7,400, maybe, having that ceiling of 30 to, say, 45-ish points. Co-main event to me might be the leverage spot this week just because I think the probability is that thing's going to go 15 minutes. Jonathan Martinez, look, you think of Jose Aldo, you think of leg kicks. You think of Jonathan Martinez, you think of leg kicks. Of course, Jonathan Martinez, it's kind of an interesting place for him here because he is a guy that he will tell you he is more scared to do interviews than he is actual fight.
Yeah, I tell you what, man, he's such a quiet kid, and it's crazy to see him succeed as much as he has because when he came into the UFC, man, I did not have much, I did not have high hopes for him at all. I remember he was fighting a friend of mine, and Andre Sukumtat, and I was like, all right, I like this matchup for Andre. And Andre went out there and spoiled the debut. And then we've seen some performances from Martinez where he's really – that entire team has really developed the calf kick game better than anybody, the low kick game, the knees up the middle, the feints and the fakes to get you biting on the lower half. To look and see that he's on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 fight win streak is really crazy to me because I don't view him as this like incredible fighter, but it just goes to show you that showing up and being consistent and just implementing a correct game plan and being smart. He's patient, and he's smart, and he doesn't go out there and make mistakes. And I think that's credit to his coaching staff.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at some of the notes I have down here on Jonathan Martinez, I know started 4-3 in the UFC's, won 6 in a row, 4 via decision. But his last 2 wins are very notable wins against Adrian Yanez, a stoppage victory against Yanez, and also a victory against Saeed Nurmagomedov. And, I mean, look, you look at some of these high-end options, I think people are going to want to get to Vitor Petrino. Michel Pereira, absolutely, I love him at 185 pounds as opposed to what he was at 170. I mean, you look at, since moving up to 85, he's got 2 first-round victories, and he hasn't even seen 90 seconds in either one of those fights. So I think that was going to get there. I think it'll be interesting to kind of see, someone like Lucindo. I would imagine people are going to kind of get away from that at 9,200 just because of the price point. And me and Pete were kind of talking right before we started the show here. I mean, Karolina Kowalkiewicz may have one of the quietest 4-fight winning streaks right now in the UFC.
Yeah, and I think like she's helped me out in some and definitely burned me in others, because like when you play the age factor and then you you pair her up against some of the up and comers, you're like, yeah, I'm not going to be backing Karolina Kowalkiewicz, but she's found a way to use her volume striking. She's even landed some takedowns and some good matchups. I mean, Felice Herrig, she subbed her pretty quick in round 2, 2 takedowns against Gomis Juarez and a takedown against Belbitsa, and Demopoulos victory as well. I mean, but like all 4 of those fighters are not necessarily the same level of fighter that she's going to be facing against Lucindo on Saturday. So I'm excited to see how it plays out. But still, you have experience versus relative inexperience, and we'll have to see how it clashes on Saturday.
Of course, as I mentioned, we do have our DraftKings contest that's already live. It's right here in the description, right here on YouTube, or if you're watching us after the fact or listening to us after the fact, it is in the show notes of this episode. Of course, let's get right into it. Of course, by the way, also, we got our Discord channel, totally free to join. Great conversations having over there. And it's not just MMA. There's all types of conversations going on, especially with the NBA playoffs going down right now. Of course, my Magic just couldn't pull it out last night. Probably hitting up the game on Friday night, so looking forward to that
sweet.
one. Yeah,
that's cool.
Tickets ain't cheap, bro. Tickets ain't cheap.
Yeah, I mean, what do you expect? I mean, that's good though. You got to go.
Yeah, I don't like. I'll say this for basketball. I don't like sitting upper level for basketball, so it's probably going to be about $200-$300 a ticket to get in the building. But yeah, it's NBA playoff basketball, and looking forward to it. Let's get right into these matchups here. Of course, we got the main event: Alexandre Pantoja defending the title against Steve Erceg. As I mentioned, this is the first title defense for Alexandre Pantoja, or excuse me, first main event for Pantoja in this one. And I was telling Pete right before the show, if you go over to ESPN MMA YouTube channel, there's a really great video that Dominic Cruz has put together and talking about the striking aspect of both these fighters. I recommend going out there and looking at that. Of course, Pantoja, nearly a 2-1 betting favorite in this one, -190, +160 is for Steve Erceg. Pantoja on DraftKings is 8,800, while Erceg is 7,400, Pete.
I think it's a really compelling matchup. I really do. I think that, like you can make the case for either fighter. I mean, granted, the experience and just the UFC fights favor Alexandre Pantoja. He's 27-5. He kind of he's matured inside the UFC. He's fought notable names, whereas a guy in Steve Erceg's kind of crashed into the scene and is getting thrown into this because he just looks so damn impressive. And it's only his 4th fight in the UFC. I mean, he has wins over Dvorak, Costa, and Schnell, but like I still don't think that Astro Boy's resume in the UFC is what's getting him this opportunity. I think it's just needing a dance partner. Timing's everything in this sport. I think the timing and everything and the way the division's laid out, it makes sense to give Erceg this shot before he possibly loses some shine against somebody else. I do think it's really competitive and intriguing, though, because I can make a case for either one. I don't mind stacking the fight, to be honest, because the value on Erceg's good at 7,400. The issue is if you stack the fight, you still need Alexandre Pantoja to go out there and hit a high number of takedowns and still meet value, in winning a decision with Erceg, just doing a lot in a loss. I think what's going to happen is we're going to see Erceg look good on the outside, establishing a long jab, good straight punches. He's a little susceptible to getting hit with some wide hooks, which Pantoja really has some like ugly striking, but he makes it ugly and he can land. And we've seen Erceg get stung in the past. Pantoja pushes a high pace, gets hit a decent amount, wrestles offensively, And I think that he's going to be somewhat surprised to see the wrestling defense of Steve Erceg and also the motor that Steve Erceg has. Granted, this is 5 rounds for Steve Erceg, and we'll see how he looks in the UFC for 5 rounds. But the way I'm thinking that this fight's going to go is that Pantoja is going to come out and he's going to look good early. He's going to look good for round 1 and round 2. And then from round 3 on, I do expect this to become a very competitive matchup where perhaps Pantoja wins a decision. No problem at all. But I think that like Erceg's big enough to establish range on the outside, hit him with some straight shots. Erceg is also talented enough in the wrestling and takedown defense department and grappling department to make it competitive and make Pantoja work. We've seen Pantoja tire in the past despite pushing a heavy pace. And if Erceg can pin Pantoja against the cage, I just think it's a different dynamic than Pantoja is accustomed to. I think Erceg has way better wrestling than Brandon Royval, who has very dangerous submissions and dangerous striking. But like I think the wrestling chops of Erceg are going to make this a very close fight. So with it being close and the line being a little wide, I don't mind taking a shot on Steve Erceg. But like I said, I do expect this to go 5 rounds, and I do expect it to look relatively competitive. Hopefully, Erceg can keep the motor going because Pantoja, despite looking and feeling tired, he's a dog, and he's fought some high level competition. I don't expect him to submit or knock out Erceg. I think this is just going to come down to how you how you judge the rounds versus damage and control, and we know that Pantoja can be a blanket for his opponents a lot of times by just laying on top. Look at that, Brandon Royval performance. Didn't really impress me all that much, to be honest, but he did have 8 takedowns and 16 minutes of control time. So anytime you're getting on top and staying on top, you have my attention. So I'm going to lean towards Erceg to win a nail-biter decision, but like I said, I'll get to both shares.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Pete, you got to imagine that if you're the Pantoja camp, I mean, part of the thought process got to be is, hey, let's test the grappling of Erceg and see what he can do here. But look, listen to what you said there. Like, I almost feel like I think Pete's just telling us Steve Erceg's in his Fight HQ lineup.
Yeah, exactly. I'm screwed every week when I tell you guys my breakdowns, and then I didn't do bad last week. I finished 8th, but
I did awful.
But yeah, but I think from a value standpoint, it makes sense, and I don't. It's a flyweight bout, and flyweights and women's MMA in general tend to go long. So I don't hate it when you're talking about high pace, high action, 5 rounds. You could even stack it, and I wouldn't be against it.
Yeah, I definitely do not mind that. I mean, I think it just comes down to kind of a roster construction aspect of, maybe some of these higher 9,000 options that have that 115, 120 point upside. How much do you want to get to those? And of course, how much dumpster diving are you doing there? Now, the co-main event is the return of Jose Aldo. Of course, Jose, as his last 3 matchups have been in boxing, going 2-0-1. This is his final fight on his UFC deal. He's kind of made it known that he just wants, when it comes to MMA, it's UFC. But we've seen kind of how this all plays out. He'll probably be in the PFL in 6 months, so we'll see how that goes. He's going to be taking on Jonathan Martinez. Jonathan Martinez is a slight betting favorite. This one -160. Jose Aldo is +135. Over on DraftKings aspect, we got Jonathan Martinez at 8,300. Aldo at 7,900. And, Pete, for the most part, just Jonathan Martinez is a guy that we obviously we both know a ton of skills that he does have here, but I've just never viewed him as a guy that I want to target for daily fantasy.
I just don't understand, man. How the hell? Good for Jonathan Martinez. Good for him. I'm not hating on the kid at all. He's very good at implementing his game and utilizing some of the best kicks, in the division and in the UFC. And for me as a big time kicker, I'm not all that impressed, but at least he's going out there and doing what a lot of people should be doing. Jonathan Martinez chops the leg so well, and you're going up against the King of Rio and the guy who basically made everybody fear leg kicks in Jose Aldo. It's been quite some time since we've seen Jose Aldo, channel that crazy Muay Thai base where he goes out there and just destroys his opponent's legs. But he does have good defense for leg kicks as well. The one kind of curveball in this situation is that Jose Aldo kind of transitioned into the worst possible sport to come back and face a kicker in, and that's boxing. Because a boxing stance is completely different than an MMA stance. Being heavier on your lead leg leaves you susceptible to getting kicked and chopped. And you're going up against a guy who's been so active in MMA that it's going to make me lean towards the guy in Jonathan Martinez, despite the resume, the skills, and the eye test from Jose Aldo. It's just like, man, like Jose Aldo might go out there. He's probably going to, defend leg kicks, but like it could look like Adrian Yanez against Jonathan Martinez, where the leg kick is there because of just being so accustomed to boxing. And the boxing base is not the best for MMA. And I think that 5 years ago I would ever be picking Jonathan Martinez to beat Jose Aldo. Hell no. And it still makes me want to pick Jose Aldo here. It's a stay away fight for me. It's just a stay away fight. I think this goes 15 minutes. If you watch Aldo's previous fights of late, it's almost like there's some hesitance. He doesn't necessarily pull the trigger all that much. It's not like he's going to go out there and wrestle offensively. I think that he could and make this look so easy by going out there and just, wrestling Jonathan Martinez to the mat, staying out of bad positions. The best way to neutralize a kicker is put him on the back. But I think that being in Rio, it's gonna make sense for people wanted to back Jose Aldo. The crowd's going to be behind him. I'm going to be backing Jose Aldo from a fan standpoint. But as far as a pick and who I think wins, I think that it's going to just be a low volume fight with not the best DFS performance. And give me the guy who's been more active in Jonathan Martinez in MMA. The Yanez fight's impressive because of the stylistic skills and the striking skills of Adrian Yanez. But the Said Nurmagomedov fight is what's kind of like a pretty big win and pretty impressive when you're comparing resumes. So, yeah, I'm going to lean towards Jonathan Martinez to win a decision. And I think that this fight underwhelms. I will definitely be underweight to the field in whatever they get to of this co-main event. And usually that's not the case.
And when you look at Jose Aldo in his last 7 MMA matchups, 6 of those have gone to the decision. The one that did not go to decision was when he was stopped by Peter Yan there in the 5th round. Yeah. Overall, I just think in terms from a GPP aspect, it's just not a fight that I want to prioritize. And you talk about this every week on the show, Pete. It's, prioritize underdogs, main event, co-main event. And I just think look, I could see if we look at ownership and Jose Aldo is in the, let's just say 15% range. Mm-hmm. Then I can see, okay, if you're throwing, multiple lineups out there, you take a shot on Jose Aldo saying, you know what, maybe he goes out there and knocks him out. And then at 7,900, likely going to be optimal. But to me, overall, it's a fight that I'm just going to stay away from. Look, we know what Jonathan Martinez, what he's going to do. I think he wins the decision. Obviously do have a little concern about, potentially the crowd affecting the judges maybe a little bit, and where, we see a situation where Jonathan Martinez is landing the more efficient strikes, but the crowd reacts more to Jose Aldo, and we all know King of Rio, and that to me would be a little bit concerned. As I look at the decision prop of Jonathan Martinez plus 140, I feel like you might sweat that one out. You might be sitting there, and when Bruce Buffer hits that microphone, you might be sitting there going, okay, hopefully he gets this.
Yeah, I think it's going long, and I think that makes a ton of sense, and that's exactly why I am going to be underweight to the fight, and I'll probably fade it for most of my lineups, just because even though Martinez may be landing the higher volume, the oohs and the ahs of the crowd and the chants, and it's hard as a judge not to be affected by that stuff. So, and that could still result in the winning fighter having 60, 70 points. And guess what? We have a pretty decent amount of fights. So I'll skip it and hopes that I'm correct with the read. But yeah, it'll be Jonathan Martinez to win the decision. But I hope Jose Aldo does, and I hope that he comes back and that he's like, you know what? Renegotiate a deal. I want to keep fighting, and we maybe one day see him fight some crazy fighters, and I would love it. I would love it a lot.
Probably depends on how much money is sitting out there for him there in the boxing world. Next up, we got a light heavyweight matchup. You got Anthony Smith taking on Vitor Petrino. Petrino is a minus 550 betting favorite, plus 375 for Anthony Smith. Petrino, 9,400 DK. Anthony Smith is 6,800. Anthony Smith 1-3 in his last 4. That one win did come against Ryan Spann. The losses against Khalil Roundtree Jr., Johnny Walker, and Magomed Ankalaev. You look at Petrino, Pete, he's 4-0 in the UFC, but 2 of those wins have come via decision.
Yeah, I like Vitor Petrino. I really do. I think that he's young. I think that he's physical. I think he's powerful with his strikes. He has good takedowns. His jiu-jitsu is improving. Like there were some situations and some opportunities in some previous fights against Praknio where it took him a little bit to kind of find that finish, but he did. He looked good in the Pedro performance. And like for him to go out there and not get hit with big shots or avoid big shots and still push through, I think it speaks volumes. And to me, like this is all about timing. Petrino is here paired up with a veteran in Anthony Smith, who has fought literally everybody within multiple divisions. Very impressive that has some victories over some notable names. But we've also seen him succumb to like big shots and kind of covering up and looking, not necessarily looking for a way out, but not reacting the same way a younger Anthony Smith would. So for my money, I'm going to be backing Vitor Petrino to win by KO here. But like I can totally see Anthony Smith, being tough enough to win a decision, to last 15 minutes. The only real good things that I see from Anthony Smith are good straight punches, which could possibly collide with Petrino's chin. Anthony Smith has a sneaky jab, and then he has some decent jiu-jitsu off of his back too. So if Petrino gets lazy, he could get triangled, as we've seen Anthony Smith do that in the past. I don't see that happening. And if Petrino, if you go back to his Dana White Contender Series fight, he was getting jabbed up. And if I'm a part of Smith's camp, it's utilize the jab and start to try to be cleaner down the middle while Petrino is swinging his wild hooks. But I think, eventually Petrino lands some damaging shots, wins the rounds with it, or possibly finishes Anthony Smith. So 9,400, I think that he's going to be a very popular play. But man, there's an X factor when you have a guy that has so much experience like Anthony Smith. But the way that he's been looking lately, I definitely think that, it's Vitor Petrino for me.
To me, this just feels like classic UFC matchmaking, where you have the up and coming fighter, then you have the vet, and looking for this young and up and coming fighter to potentially showcase a little bit of their skills against the vet here. And look, I think we all know Anthony Smith is on the back nine of his career, and look, he obviously has a very good broadcasting career ahead of him for what he's done with the UFC. Also, the podcast he's doing with Michael Bisping. Look, I think that Vitor takes this one. I think the only question is whether or not he's able to finish Anthony Smith or not. Next up, we got a middleweight matchup. We got Michel Pereira taking on Ihor Potieria. Potieria is a plus 400 betting underdog, minus 600 for Michel. He's 9,600 DK, 6,600 for Potieria here. Of course, I mentioned about Michel here since coming up to 185 pounds, 2-0. Both those wins coming in 1 minute and 1 second, 1 minute and 6 seconds. Now, of course, this is a replacement opponent for him. He's initially supposed to take on Murdov, which this is one of the craziest things. I was over at Tapology doing some research for this card. That is the only fight change we've had for all this entire fight card, Pete.
Who had the original bout?
Murdov.
Against who?
Michel.
Ah, okay, cool. Yeah, I like how Michel is staying active. And him at this new weight class, it just, I don't know, man. It goes to show you that sometimes, you're seeing fighters less than 100% every time they step into the octagon. And I do feel like I've totally zapped myself in the past when it comes to weight cuts, and I'm sure I haven't cut, nearly as much weight as Michel Pereira, but it's tough. And some people have it down to a science, and comes down to body fat, and wrestlers cut weight better than anybody in the world. I just think that Michel, we're starting to see his true potential, right? And this is a totally winnable matchup against Ihor Potieria. Potieria he's dangerous. So despite his fluffy record that was kind of against low-level opposition, I still think that he's dangerous. So I think that you have to be wise to everything that comes your way. He has good counter shots, very good boxing, sneaky boxing, not the most durable, not the best submission defense or takedown defense. I think that Michel, in the past, when he gets extended, he tends to utilize his wrestling, which I think is great. And I think that he has multiple paths to victory here. And if it stays striking, that's kind of like what Potieria wants until Potieria gets hit with some big shots. We've seen him get hurt and dropped and finished numerous times, outclassed against Olberg, outclassed against Nikolai, Rafael Bellato. He's beating the hell out of Rafael Bellato, and then Bellato turned the tide by knocking him out, taking him down and ground and pounding him. So, like, I think that Pereira is going to win via ground and pound. That's kind of how I see this happen. I wish like I could bet standing knockout, ground and pound, because like I just view him getting on top similar how Bellato did and just raining down shots. And I think 9,600 makes a ton of sense. As far as a dart throw, you can always, throw money at Potieria and kind of just close your eyes and hope that he lands a big shot. He has knockdowns against Brischek, Bellato, Shogun Hua. So he's dangerous, but I do think that this is a tailor-made matchup for Michel Pereira, and I'll be backing him at 9,600.
Now, of course, if you're a degenerate out there and you want to make a wager on someone missing weight, Ihor Potieria did miss weight his last one. I'm still amazed that is something that's being offered by DraftKings. I am amazed.
We were talking about this before. You're playing with fire right there, because that's going to stop. Like, I think that's going to stop relatively soon, because that's like something you shouldn't be able to bet on.
Yeah, because look, we've both been there behind the scenes.
There's too much inside info.
Yeah, look, there's too many things that you see, especially if you're there all week. It's not hard to figure out who's having a tough weight cut and who's not.
Oh.
And especially, like even if you're one of the corner people.
That's what I'm saying.
I feel like if I'm the UFC, I'm going to DraftKings, who's a sponsor of theirs, and going, hey,
put a kibosh to that, man.
This is not a good idea, because you're just like it's like you're inviting
collusion
cornermen to essentially call up their buddies and say, hey, let's fire and make a weight.
I don't think DraftKings is going to be profitable with that. Or Vegas.
Look, the first time someone puts like $10,000 on someone to miss weight, that's going to set off major red flags.
Yeah. Hey, maybe that's my path to make it from like a betting standpoint is, forget projecting fights. Let's just project weight misses and who's going to make weight. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I know. Look, we all have our degenerate gambling aspects, toxic traits that we have. But yeah, man, definitely not betting on someone.
I'll be betting on table. Like I've done like crazy small bets in the past, and like betting on table tennis over in Asia and all that, like stuff like that. But like, this can literally affect the landscape of MMA and just betting in general. Like, I don't want to see anything. I don't want to see coaches getting fired. They should stay out of it. But like, you are kind of inviting people to be like, ooh, maybe if I just make a phone call and contact somebody, we can make some money, because we know damn well he's 22 pounds off.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I'm totally there with you there. I would not go there. By the way, that TKO prop on Michel Pereira minus 150, so not really a lot of juice there. Maybe you want to try to look at that. You might get, even though both of his wins at 85 would come in the first round, maybe look at maybe he survives 5 minutes, and then maybe look at that round 2 prop there in terms of that one. Next up, we have got Paul Craig taking Kyle Borralho, also a 6-1 betting favorite. Paul Craig plus 400. He's 6,700 DK, 9,500 for Kyle Borralho. Borralho 5-0 in the UFC. 4 of those wins have come via decision here. And of course, Paul Craig, to me, one of the crazy stats with him is he's got 17 fights in the UFC, and he has only gone to the decision twice, Pete.
Yeah, Paul Craig's an animal. He's won me money in the past against Shogun, against Nikita Krylov. But, styles make fights, and I do not like this style for him. I don't mind him going up against other jiu-jitsu guys, but, like, you can't be going up against a jiu-jitsu guy who has significantly better striking than you. Paul Craig hits hard, yes. And do I think that, he can have some success within his division? Absolutely. But I think that the UFC is just putting him in this position to build Kyle Borralho. And I think that Borralho is disgusting. I think that he's so good. He can take people down and sub them anytime he wants. A Damian Maia prodigy. I also think that his karate and his striking in general, he's very elusive, has great straight shots, and he's going to knock Paul Craig out. He's not going to submit him. He's going to knock Paul Craig out. He's going to hit him with a beautiful cross, and he's either going to knock him out cold or he's going to follow him up and land some ground and pound. He's knocking Paul Craig out. I know that in the past we've kind of channeled our Paul Craig dart throws. I don't think this is the week at all. And maybe I'm dead wrong, but I think that this is a clear easy win for Caio Borralho to win by KO at 9,500.
Look, I think it should be. I think you're spot on. But like, if you're saying you want to take some pump plays this week, I know there's already a question about this. I mean, like, look, you look at someone like a Paul Craig, you're going to look at someone like an Anthony Smith. You know, those to me are going to be your pump plays. And I mean, look, if you're taking Paul Craig, to me, you take him in a GPP. Like, that is a total GPP dart throw, and just say, you know what, he might just flop to his back at some point and say, follow me to the ground. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, and I would imagine that's probably been part of the training camp in this one is like, hey, look, this is what he's going to do. Let's make him, let's put his ass on the feet.
Yeah. So I think that, like, for me, in a one-on-one, 1v1 situation, Anthony Smith or Paul Craig, who I would put in my lineups, I may be on an island, and I may hold Caio Borralho to a much higher degree than most people. I'd be picking Anthony Smith just because of him being a veteran, and like he still has knockout power. He did go the distance with Ryan Spann, who Ryan Spann completely got destroyed last weekend. But still, I would much rather Anthony Smith than Paul Craig. But if you disagree with me, that's completely fine.
Next up, we got Jack Shore taking on Joanderson. Brito. Jack Shore is a plus 135, betting underdog minus 160 for Brito. Shore 7,700 on DK. Brito is 8,500. Brito is 4-1 in the UFC. All of his UFC wins have come via finish. Jack Shore 6-1 in the UFC. Of course, that only loss coming against Ricky Simon, and this is his first fight in nearly 15 months, Pete.
My goodness, man, I like this fight. I like Jack Shore. I like Joanderson Brito. I'd like to see Jack Shore get a different opponent for his first fight at this weight class. But I mean, the UFC when you're looking at records, 16-3-1 versus 17-1. So it makes sense from a paper standpoint, but I do think it's a tough matchup for Jack Shore to debut within this weight class. I don't necessarily think he's going to be as physical as Joanderson Brito. I worry about his chin against Joanderson Brito. I think that the offensive wrestling from both of these guys is pretty good, but Joanderson Brito is stronger and more of the explosive athlete, whereas Jack Shore is the more consistent guy, kind of like the steady Eddie, where he can just go out there and, keep a consistent pace, and you either, maintain the pace with him, or he's going to just start to, get past you a little bit. And that's kind of what I think is going to happen. Joanderson Brito is going to look like very dominant early. He could even knock out Jack Shore, make it look really easy. We've seen his chin Jack Shore's chin get tested against Ricky Simon, and then he was eventually subbed in round 2. That could have been a result of the weight cut. I'm not necessarily sure. But like we've also seen Joanderson Brito, if he gets extended, he can lose a bout. Like he did lose to Bill Algeo in his UFC debut. On the Contender Series, we did see Joanderson Brito have an absolute war with Diego Lopez, who I hold in probably like some of the highest regard within the entire division. I love Diego Lopez, but like what I'm projecting in my head is Joanderson Brito looks way too physical and lands the better shots against Jack Shore early, and then from like second half of round 2 to round 3, we see Jack Shore start to take over a little bit and start to implement his game, land takedowns, maybe reverse some position, get some top control. And I think this goes long, but I still think that Joanderson Brito does enough to win a decision. 8,500. I'm going to be backing him because he has the likelihood of getting a finish, but also I think the chances of him winning 2 rounds is much higher than Jack Shore. So Jack Shore needs to do a lot in his debut within his weight class. You tell me he wins, I'm not all that surprised, but I think that would result in Brito somewhat gassing out. If Bill Algeo can do it, I think Jack Shore can do it. Algeo's good, but we've seen his flaws as well. So give me Joanderson Brito to win the decision here at 8,500.
And when you look at those decision props, actually plus 350 on both sides of the equation in terms of that one. And I know, and when I was hand building, I was looking at that Jack Shore at 7,700. I was like, man, that would really allow me to get to some of the things I want to get to in terms of that one. Next up, we got a female matchup. Kowalkiewicz taking on Lucindo. Lucindo is a minus 450 betting favorite, plus 325 for Kowalkiewicz. She's 7,000 on DK. Lucindo is 9,200 on TK. And I mentioned this at the beginning of the show, Pete. Karolina Kowalkiewicz, one of the quietest 4-fight winning streaks we've seen. You did a great job of noting the competition that's been against. But when you look at her history in the UFC, she has 7 UFC losses. 6 of those losses have come against fighters who have either been a UFC champion or competed for a UFC title.
Yeah, I think that Karolina Kowalkiewicz is a staple within women's MMA. Like, she's older, yes. But she's kind of a gatekeeper right now, in my opinion. I don't see her climbing the rankings and fighting for a title. I think she's kind of where she's at to stay for a little bit and test these younger fighters. And in certain matchups, I'm going to like Karolina Kowalkiewicz. I don't necessarily like her in this matchup because I think that her opponent, Iasmin Lucindo, can match the volume and also probably be the better takedown artist. The one thing that I really do love for Kowalkiewicz is that she's a part of the best team on the planet, an American Top Team. So, like, she's in there with the younger fighters each and every day. She has some of the best cornermen and the best strategies going into fights because that's what all American Top Team fighters have. I think that should be well prepared. I just think that should be slightly a step behind when Iasmin Lucindo starts to mix in takedowns. I think Lucindo could literally be the leverage spot of the week. I don't have ownership, but I think that within the 9,000 range, she's probably the least appealing from a finishing standpoint, but she probably has significant potential to get a decent or high score with takedowns. So I don't mind it at all. High volume, because Kowalkiewicz striking in general is always high volume. So you have to match it, exceed it, and possibly work on some takedowns. So I think Lucindo at 9,200 is a very solid play. I don't hate the Kowalkiewicz value. She is on a 4-fight win streak. I think styles make fights. Matchups mean everything. And I'll be leaning towards the younger fighter in Lucindo here in this matchup.
And you look at Lucindo to win via decision, minus 103. So I think it kind of tells you where the betting public is at this point. In terms of this one, I would imagine that goes 15 minutes. And, I mean, look, if Lucindo can, rack up a ton of takedowns, maybe that does lead her to being optimal. And you bring a great point. Could be that 9,005 that really is that leverage spot this week. Next up, we got Brener taking on Orolbai. Orolbai is a minus 250 betting favorite, plus 205 for Brener. Brener 7,200 DK. And Orolbai is 9,000. Pete, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, like, anybody on this slate, like Elvis Brener deserves to be circled because he's probably the biggest dog in the world and will fight for your dollar at every moment of a fight. I mean, I can't tell you. I think I picked against him in all 3 of his fights, and I have to be honest. Like, I'm as transparent with you guys as I can be. I tell you when I'm right. I tell you when I'm wrong. I got no problem telling you when I'm wrong, and I think I've been wrong in all 3 fights. Tukugov, I'm pretty sure I picked Tukugov. Kuta Taladze, I picked Kuta Taladze. Krzyzewski, I don't even remember what the hell that happened in that fight, but I'm pretty sure I didn't pick Elvis Brener. But I'll tell you what, Elvis Brener, it doesn't matter. Like, he hits really hard. I don't think that his takedown defense is great. In a lot of his fights, he's getting his ass kicked. He really is. But he turns the tide. His opponents gas out. He kind of Homer Simpsons away into a win where he just absorbs so many strikes. His opponents get exhausted from beating him up. And then when they're tired, he gets going, and then he puts a pace on people, and he breaks them. I mean, he broke Guram Kutataladze, which really, really surprised me. He hit so damn hard, he knocked out Krzyzewski. So, like, man, Elvis Brener needs to be circled. Myktybek, Orolbai, relatively unproven, fighting at former lightweight in Uros Medic on short notice when Medic was preparing for a striker. And now you toss a Myktybek Orolbai, who's not a striker, loves to really just lace up the wrestling shoes. So it was a complete stylistic flip-flop for Medic, which could be part of the result, but I also think it's just like the style. Like, Medic will always struggle in matchups like that and will always shine in striking matchups, as he did against Tim Means last week. So Myktybek Orolbai, I think, can land takedowns here against Elvis Brener. He can be the more physical. He can land ground and pound. He can attempt submissions. He just has to be very careful on the feet. So I don't hate anybody if you circle Elvis Brener. He's proven me wrong time and time again. But I think that Myktybek Orolbai, with the high pace that he pushes, with a full camp, the takedowns in his arsenal, the ground and pound, the submission skills, I think that this guy is is going to put up a very strong performance here against Elvis Brener. So 9,000 Orolbai. I'm going to be picking him and, siding with him pretty significantly.
And you mentioned about Rosmedich, and he mentioned in his post-fight interview that was one of the biggest learning lessons in his career is the fact of you got to be ready for anything, anytime. You could have that change in opponent. It's a totally different style, and we saw that last week. They're getting that win there against Tim Means. Next up, we got Gene Silva taking on William Gomis. Gomis a plus 115, betting underdog minus 135 for Silva. Silva 8,600 on DK, where Gomis is 7,600. And there are two fights on this card that have a notable size reach advantage for one fighter, and William Gomis has got a 4-inch reach advantage, Pete.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Gene Silva is an exciting fighter, right? From Contender Series to his UFC debut, you know that he's going to throw leather and bite down on a mouthpiece and try to knock you out and put a pace on you. The issue is I always say, and it's not like I made this quote up, but styles make fights. And William Gomis is just not there to be hit a lot. Like, he's okay with dancing on the outside. He's okay with being the matador to you being the bull. He's fine with putting out a very boring fight. Him picking up a win against Francis Marshall. I mean, like, Francis Marshall, if you stand in a phone booth and trade with him, you saw the fight that he had on the Contender Series with Connor Matthews. Very exciting, very dangerous. William Gomis has no part of it. He wants to dance on the outside and land some sniper-like type of shots and not be there for the return, which is very smart from a DFS standpoint. Not the most exciting. Now, I actually think that William Gomis, if he does get cornered, can get knocked out. I mean, everybody can. But, like, Gene Silva, as time goes on, I think he's going to become a little frustrated with this stylistic clash, and we're going to see William Gomis pick up a decision win here at 7,600. Gene Silva could also walk into a shot from getting a little too eager and a little too aggressive. So with the crowd behind him, going to try to make up for losing some rounds, get desperate. Sometimes, getting desperate works out, and sometimes it doesn't and gets you caught. So I'll be picking William Gomis to stay on the outside and kind of snipe him up. 7,600 to win a decision.
Next up, we got Joaquim Silva taking on Drakkar Klose. Drakkar Klose is a minus 180 betting favorite, plus 150 for Joaquim Silva. He's 7,500 DK, where Drakkar Klose is 8,700. And when you look at Joaquim Silva, a majority of his wins, Pete, do come in the first round. And I think the big question for me, Pete, is do you trust Drakkar Klose?
Yeah, I think, like, from an underdog standpoint, from all the fighters that we were looking at that can actually get you a finish, I think that Joaquim Silva is a guy that you got to circle. Like, he hits really hard. He gave Arman Tsarukyan big problems in their fight. And I was like, what the hell? He was priced at 6,400 against Arman Tsarukyan. Landed a left hook that had Tsarukyan staggering and wobbling all over, and then ended up getting the hell beat out of him in round 2 and round 3 and getting finished. So, like, Tsarukyan still did what he needed to do and won that fight. But it goes to show you that Joaquim Silva, Neto BJJ, has very, very powerful strikes. He has good submission skills as well. And he's somewhat volatile. So, like, in this matchup against Drakkar Klose, who has shown the ability to win dangerous fights, put himself in harm's way to get victories and finishes in his own right, I don't know, man. I kind of feel like Joaquim Silva knocks him out, but I could be completely wrong here. I do think that this goes long because, like, Joaquim Silva, I thought that if he could knock out Clay Guida, I'd be like, all right, cool. But it went long with Clay Guida, different type of style. I think that Klose will be much more willing to engage in a fight. I want to pick Klose to win a decision, but in finish-only markets, I actually think that I'd probably pick Joaquim Silva. So I'll still say that Drakkar Klose wins a competitive decision. But this is probably my worst read on the entire card, and I got no problem telling you that. I really don't know. I don't trust either fighter, to be honest.
Now, of course, we do have 3 fighters who are making their UFC debut on this fight card, and we're going to talk about all 3 of those fighters here coming up next. First up, we have got a matchup between Mauricio Ruffy and Jamie Mullarkey. Ruffy making his UFC debut here. When you look at, he's never gone the distance in his career. 6 of his 10 fights have ended in the first round. He is a minus 190 betting favorite here against Mullarkey, who's at plus 160. Mullarkey at 7,800, while Mauricio is at 8,400, Pete. Yeah,
so I'll tell you what, man, like, Jamie Mullarkey's, if he gets extended, sometimes it's questionable decisions, and you're like, man, did he win that fight? He can wrestle really well. He can strike really well and hits really hard. But like defensively, he's so open. Like his chin's way up in the air. He can be winning a fight and then get touched on the chin and get knocked out as he did against Muhammad Naimov. The John McDessie fight didn't really impress me all that much. Nasrat Haqparast. I think that Malarkey's skills are good. And sometimes you see these fighters that are very skilled, but they're not durable. And I don't think that Jamie Malarkey's durable enough to be dealing with a guy in Mauricio Huffy. So Mauricio Huffy here at 8,400, I'm going to circle him. A really big guy. Want to see how he looks on the scale. I wouldn't be surprised to see if he misses weight. But a very big guy. And as long as he has an okay weight cut, I think that he finishes Jamie Malarkey here. If he has a bad weight cut, we could see Malarkey just push a significant pace as he has done in the past. Like Malarkey still has decision wins over Prado, Johnson, but a lot of the wins that you see are kind of against volatile competition. So I'll be picking Mauricio Huffy here at 8,400, and I like him a lot. Unproven in the UFC, yes, but I just think that stylistically and a part of a very strong camp, I think that he can knock out Malarkey and make it look pretty easy.
Matt, you just made me crack up in the chat. Just made me crack up.
I don't see it. What did he say?
He said, he goes, "What's Devin's wild ass play of the week?"
Oh yeah.
Anybody who has a score, they get that joke.
You guys better be nice in chat. You guys were,
Oh, he had his Laker blinders on. Like, bro, what team are you watching? Like, the season's over. It's over.
Yeah, well, I got my Sixers blinders on because I have some Sixers futures for Eastern Conference Finals and even for to make it to the finals. So last night's performance was great. So I just need them to tie it up and then Game 7.
No, you want to know who's messed up in the NBA, right?
Who?
The Pacers.
Yeah.
You should have took out the Bucks last night because watch, Game 6
If
roll around
healthy,
Indy.
Yeah.
I would be shocked if Giannis and Dame play Game 6. They done messed up. They done messed up. You got. I saw the stat.
First time pissed.
First time ever in NBA history that a team has won a playoff game where their top 2 regular season scorers did not play.
I'll tell you what, man. That's next man up. Step the hell up and play. You're all NBA level. So Portis was pissed, especially because he got ejected the previous game. So, but I'll tell you what. I've covered the NBA in the past for the Nets, and I love the playoffs right now. Like, I think it's just very exciting. I'm having a great time watching it.
Oh yeah, man! Last night, I watched a little bit of the Knicks Sixers game. I was mostly watching the Magic Cavs game, which was a really good game. It was back and forth. Unfortunately, the Magic just outside of Banchero and Wagner just don't have much out there. Even though if people aren't watching that series, the Wagner brothers they're lighting up Cavs fans. It's hilarious. If you're not seeing that, but it's But let's get back to it. And then our next matchup, a female matchup, is two fighters who are both making their official UFC debut here, Barbosa and Hernessa. Barbosa, one of the things that really impressed me about her is the fact of you go down that resume, her third professional fight was against Karolina Silva. Karolina Silva was 9-3 at that point in her career. And of course, when you look at Hernessa, she's previously competed in kickboxing and boxing, and 3 of her 5 MMA wins are via split decision, Pete.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, man, the kickboxer in Karakady, she had an exciting fight. Yes, she did. But stylistically, I've been saying stylistically this whole time, but it's true. Styles make fights, and I'm leaning more towards that for my breakdowns. You have a striker versus grappler, and usually you could pick the volume striker to get better moments in fights. But when I see Barbosa having solid takedowns and excellent jiu-jitsu, and then you also see that Barbosa's has some notable wins. Her having a win over Karolina Silva is kind of like Joe Duffy having a win over Conor McGregor on his come up. So I think that Barbosa, she's doing some things right. There's a bigger gap in her grappling, in the grappling between Barbosa and Karakady than the striking between Karakady and Barbosa. So I'll be picking Barbosa to pick up a sub here over Karakady and put her in some unfamiliar situations. 8,900. I like Barbosa. It is women's MMA, both unproven, both volatile. Karakady throws crazy volume. If for some reason Barboza cannot get the fight to the mat, then you can see Karakady win the decision. But if you look at her fight film and her fight tape, a lot of them are split decisions or, not decisive victories. So I will trust in Barboza's resume and also her, significant skill on the mat to pick up a win here.
As I want to say in her Potieria series fight, I want to say she landed 184 strikes in that one. I mean, she's a, when you watch that fight film, if you go on YouTube, you can see some of her older fights. I mean, she definitely wants to sit there and have a striking matchup. Next up, we got Bonfim taking on Pichel. Pichel is a plus 375 betting underdog, minus 550 for Bonfim. Bonfim, 9,300 DK. Vince Pichel is 6,900, Pete.
Yeah, so I think that everybody's sleeping on the toughness of Vince Pichel. From hell, Pichel will go out there and compete on the feet, try to put you and pin you against the cage to win minutes and moments, basically to stay out of danger. I do think that he's going to be a step behind in every place, though. Like Ismael Bonfim losing to Benoit Saint-Denis doesn't look that bad anymore. Even though Benoit Saint-Denis lost to Dustin Poirier, there were some intangibles in that fight with being on antibiotics and all that. And Saint-Denis still looked dangerous in round 1 against Dustin Poirier. So I think that Ismael Bonfim still is a prospect to watch. 19-4, very impressive on the Contender Series. Very impressive in his debut over Terrence McKinney. What I will say, though, is I think that he's going to win the decision here over Vince Pichel. He can knock him out, yep. But I think everybody's expecting like a violent finish. And I do think that Vince is tough enough and smart enough to stay out of harm's way in some moments. I think he's going to get touched up and then he's going to clinch. Going to get touched up and then he's going to get clinched. So I think that Bonfim's going to win the decisive decision here at 9,300. So yeah, I think he's going to be back, in the win column, and it makes sense to pair him up against a very aged fighter in Vince Pichel.
And our opening matchup of the night will be our 8,200, 8,000 matchup, Costa and Borjas. Borjas is a plus 115, betting underdog, minus 135 for Costa. Borjas is the 8,000 fighter. Costa is the 8,200 fighter, Pete.
Hey, I like Alessandro Costa a lot. I really do. I kind of view him as Alexandre Pantoja light. I told you that earlier, before the show. I just think that his skills are pretty comparable to Alexandre Pantoja. Very dangerous striker, very good wrestler, very good submission artist. Losing to Amir Albazi does not look bad in your debut. Knocking out and finishing Jimmy Flick looks awesome. Losing a competitive decision to Steve Erceg, having some moments in there, but just being a step behind doesn't look all that bad. I think that Alessandro Costa is very good. Whereas Kevin Borjas, I think that in certain matchups he could look good. I think that he's relatively unproven, wants to keep the fight on the feet. Definitely not the better mixed martial artist. He's probably the better striker from a technical standpoint. But I do think that Alessandro Costa just checks more boxes for me. And I like the value here at 8,200. I think this is a little bit of a buy low spot for Alessandro Costa. I mean, he was 9,400 against Jimmy Flick, 7,600 against Steve Erceg, and 8,200 in a matchup against Kevin Borjas. Unless Borjas clips him, I just don't see how he wins this fight. So give me Alessandro Costa.
Yeah, I'm with you in terms of that. Let's get into our straight up fight picks. These are non-DFS related. Main event, I will say, and still.
I'm going to go and new, Steve Erceg.
Co-main event, my gut says, my gut and heart says two different things. And my brain says one thing. Yeah. My gut says Jose Aldo is going to win a questionable decision, so I'll go Jose Aldo.
I don't mind that at all. I say questionable decision, Jonathan Martinez.
I'll take Petrino. Give me Michel.
Yep, Pereira.
Borralho.
I'm
going to go Jack Shore as underdog number 2 for me.
Ooh, for real. I'm going to go Joanderson Brito. I don't hate it, though.
Give me underdog number 3, Karolina Kowalkiewicz.
Ooh, I'm going to go Iasmin Lucindo.
Orolbai.
I
will go Silva.
I'm going to go William Gomis.
Give me underdog number 4 here, Joaquim Silva.
I want to do it. I'm going to still say Drakkar close, but man, I tell you, it's my worst read on the card.
Give me Mauricio.
Mauricio Ruffy for me.
I will go
Barboza.
Give me Bonfim. And I will go Costa. We'll get some quick questions in here before we get out of here on this episode. Value plays under 8K and 3 core plays on DraftKings. I think in terms of core plays, For me, I'm really looking. I think I'm going to build lineups around Michel Pereira. I think that's where it kind of starts for me. Then I think it's, then I'm probably trying to find, looking for some finishers. I kind of like Orolbai as a finisher. And I think Mauricio is another one to look at.
Yeah, so Mauricio Huffy is a core for me. I like Orolbai as a core, and I like Alessandro Costa. So like those three are probably like three of my favorites.
And I think when you look at value plays underneath AK, I look at someone like a Joaquim Silva just because of, my distrust for Drakkar Klose a little bit there at 7,500. So he's someone that I would look at there. Jack Shore, I just don't know in a 15-minute decision what that kind of price point, what he's going to bring in terms of a fantasy point perspective there. And then I think Steve Erceg has got to be, especially if you think the thing's going to go 15 minutes. Best punt play, and how do you think the crowd's going to affect the fights as Brazilian fans can go crazy? I mean, look, you would think that the judges would not let that affect them, but I've seen this sport way too many times where it can affect. I mean, look, I've seen it in fights in the United States between two Americans where it's affected. To me, best punt play. I mean, I'm thinking punt play. I'm talking 7,400 below. If you tell me 7,500 below, it would be Joaquim Silva.
Yeah, I think Joaquim Silva he can win all day long. I actually might have more Joaquim Silva than I previously expected. I think for punt play, it's got to be Elvis Brener, just from being a dog and proving all of us wrong at time and time again, getting his ass kicked and still coming back and finishing his opponents. I think it's pretty crazy, and nobody else under that range has that same thing that they can say.
Best leverage play. Pita had mentioned about Lucindo as a high price leverage play. I think you got to look at the co-main event. Even though I don't really love it for GPPs, I think that could be potentially your best leverage fight of the week.
Very good point.
Takedown upside, Barbosa and Lucindo, I think, are the two that really stick out to me.
I like Barbosa. I like Lucindo. I think Orolbai is probably my number one for takedowns. And then somebody else for takedowns, I think it's Alessandro Costa against Borjas. I think that's the smartest game plan.
Ranking the 9K fighters, quickly I'll go with this. Give me, I would go 1 Pereira, 2 Borralho, 3 Petrino, 4 Orolbai, 5 Lucindo, 6 Bonfim.
All right, I'm going to go Pereira 1, Borralho 2. I think I'm the same as you. I want to put Orolbai higher, but I see these other guys in just such softer matchups. So I'm in total agreement with you.
Do you pivot off lineups that are all favorites under 9K, seeing quite a few pop up? I think you probably got to try to get at least one of those 9K options in your lineup.
Yeah, you have to have one.
Yeah. Someone already asked about leverage options. Best pay up options. To me, I think you look at those first two fights on the main card with Caio and Michel.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I think this could be breakouts. Well, I mean, they're both at just such. I think it's going to be a lot of finishes. I really do. I think that Borralho could become like one of the biggest talking points from this card.
We'll finish on this question. Which dog has the best 100-point plus potential, and do you think the optimal could be an all-Brazilian lineup? All-Brazilian lineup?
I say no.
I say no, but I can certainly see it. I think that when you look at these underdogs with 100-point plus upside here.
I think it's Joaquim Silva for me, dude.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just kind of going up my spreadsheet here. He's the first guy that kind of came up my mind just in terms of 100-plus points. I mean, look, you got punts in Paul Craig and Anthony Smith. If they can catch either one of their opponents, I think Paul Craig, it's about being on the mat. Anthony Smith, I think it's more maybe using his striking there. But I would say I think Joaquim Silva will be the guy that I would point to the most.
100%. You are the man, Jason.
And, of course, if you got any questions, you can line those up in Discord. Myself and P will get to you. You can leave a comment right here on YouTube. We'll certainly get to those as well. Of course, we got our Discord channel. We got our DraftKings contest that's already live. Be sure to sign up for that. We'd love to get that contest filled up here for Saturday for UFC 301. Of course, be sure to hit that thumbs up button on this video. Subscribe to the channel. If you're not subscribed to the channel, we really do appreciate that. Pita, any final comments?
Just want to say Jason's the man. Jason's the absolute man. And we appreciate all you guys tuning into the show as always. Appreciate Jason covering for me when I can't make it. Trying to just manage a million things over here as Jason is too. But sometimes it's just impossible. And if it's a shitty card, it's much easier for me to just not have to worry about it. But going forward, I mean, the plan is to cover as much as possible. But that's why we have the Discord channel. You know, it's like you can engage with us. Jason's very active in that. Tag me so I see your questions sometimes. But yeah, I think this is going to be a good card, and I think it's going to surprise some people from a performance standpoint. And I can't wait to see our guys win some money. I mean, like one of our most avid listeners and Coach, he wins every damn weekend. The guy is amazing. He's probably one of the best players out there.
I'll give you people some insights. Next time Pete can't do the show, Coach is going to be joining me.
I love it. I think it's perfect. I think it's perfect. I mean, the guy's won damn near everything for MMA, and it's a completely different type of style. But I don't hate that at all. I mean, it's cool to have a sub, and you know, we're lucky to just have you guys a part of it. I mean, our contest is growing. The fan base, I don't want to call it fan base. The community's growing, and it's all because you guys are supporting the channel. So every time we do a show, you get us over 100 likes for the algorithm. Comment as much as you can on the videos for us. Share the content and join the Discord to talk to us.
Of course, we do have a UFC fight card next week. That's going to be the card in St. Louis, headlined by Nascimento and Derek Lewis. Just looking at that fight card, I think we got some GPP fights that are definitely a part of that fight card. Sure. So we appreciate everyone tuning in for this episode of the Fight HQ podcast. We'll be back here next week to talk about that Derek Lewis and Nascimento fight card.